how do you know when you're disconnected? I'm like, so many people are disconnected from their bodies and from their emotions because we all live in our minds and we actually don't realize how much we disassociate by just going into our mind and being practical. And then use your mind to make it so. Start feeling that emotion.
Hey coach, Xenia Wood here, and this is the Swift Coaches Academy podcast, created for service-based business owners who are ambitious enough to break free from the forever hustle and create scalable businesses that truly make an impact while also giving us freedom. With more than a decade of experience, we're not here to waste your time on theory, instead just sharing what works and what doesn't to help you get clear as fuck on your next move and show you exactly how to implement the systems and strategies that you need to scale with confidence. Today, I'm super excited for our podcast episode with Jess Cameron. Probably a name that many of you haven't heard before, but holy moly, when Jess, I first heard you speak, I think I came up to you after this and was like, I love your pants. But really what I probably should have said is like, holy fuck, that like rocked me and sort of like in the best way possible kind of like shook me to wake up a little bit. So I guess firstly, I just want to say thank you for being brave enough and having the courage to speak to 1,000 people. I don't know if you've done big events before, but I definitely felt the impact of that.
Oh, thank you. And I'm also glad you like my pants.
The thing we think about when we like bump into someone, right? Not always the shit that you probably should say. Anyway, so for those who don't know you, I'm going to do a little intro of who you are, and then I'm going to get you to sort of dive back to like how this started, how you got here. Because I think sometimes when you say intuitive coach or empowerment and leadership and supporting individuals who are high performers and help people break through barriers and all the sort of mindset terminology that we hear thrown around a lot, I think it can get a bit diluted, wishy-washy. Oh yeah, she's just another one of those life/mindset coaches. And I guess you're the one who's eloquent with words here amongst the two of us. So I'm going to get you to, I guess, help explain the difference between what we might see, what we might think of versus the power of the work that you do and how it's different.
Well, I think when I first started out, I was a mindset performance coach for big sales companies. And so basically, if it wasn't a skill set issue, then it was a mindset issue. And that's when they would get sent to me. So staff or business owners or whoever it was within the companies around Australia, it was an Australian-wide company, they would get sent to me if they couldn't figure out what the performance issue was. And so I did that for about 5 or 6 years around various like big, some international companies too. And before I started out on my own and wanted to do my own clients, I was like, what are the specific things that I have expertise in? Because I think people, they hear life coach or they hear lifestyle coach. And to me, that's so wanky. Like,
I'm
no
so glad
offense
you
to
said that.
people that use that title, right? Because it's just
Yeah.
we just use the titles that we know. But to me, if I'm wanting if I'm wanting to play basketball, I'm going to look for a basketball coach. I'm not looking for a sports coach. If I want to play soccer, I'm looking for a soccer coach, not a sports coach. And so to me, I'm just like, if you're going to coach in something, then that area has to be something that you are embodied in, or at least to a significant enough degree that others are going to come for you for support in that area. And so I don't believe that anybody has every single area of their entire life that they are an expert in. So when it's like a life coach, I'm like, but what are you actually embodied in? Like, what's the area that you have spent a lot of time and energy and investment, I guess, developing that expertise? And so for me, it was mindset and relationships. And so that's why I always said mindset and relationship coach. It couldn't be more simple. It couldn't be more basic. I'm very good at working with the mind. I'm very good at working with relationship dynamics. And so that's sort of for the way that I guess I'd use that terminology is, and it's developed over the years, where it's like I'm the mindset coach that helps you get out of the mind. And when
Mm.
people are Googling, they think their problem is mindset. And so they're going to Google mindset coach. So I've used that terminology because that's an easy access point. Or they're like, I've got a issue with my relationship coach. They find that access point. But when they come to me, they're going to get a lot more. Like a lot of the time, we do not just mindset, it's about emotional capacity and emotional regulation and how to actually get out of the mind, out of your own way, because the mind is what's conditioned, the mind's what's traumatized, the mind's what's limited. Most of your problems and your blocks come from the mind. So let's learn how to get out of that and into your purpose.
I love that. So let's flash back for a minute. How did you get started into this? What were you doing beforehand? And did you fall into it? Were you always attracted to like mindset psychology of people? How did that work?
This is always an interesting story. Everyone wants to know this question, and you think I've answered it that many times that I've come up with some very streamlined, fancy way to explain that I basically just followed my intuition into it. And I knew, I guess, one of the things that some of your listeners might relate to is when you are naturally good at something, you think it's normal. You assume that everybody should be good at that. You actually assume it's not really that big of a thing because it's so normal to you, because it's a gift for you. And one of the things that when I'm talking to clients, I'm trying to help them find like their purpose or their mission or what the thing is that they're passionate about. And usually they overlook the thing that has always been natural to them because they're like, yeah, but that's not a thing. That's just normal. I'm like, it's only normal because it comes naturally and authentically to you. That's actually the thing you should monetize, not the thing that you just went and studied, unless that is in alignment with your passion. The thing that you got a paper for, or the thing that you thought was going to make money, or the thing that made sense, or you've got a degree for it. They're the things that we're told is what's going to help us make money. So that's what we study, or that's what we do, and that's what we monetize. The things that we're actually gifted at, though, that is our genius. And if I'm going to go to, let's say a PT, personal trainer, or a sports coach, I'm going to go to two options: somebody that's studied and done their courses and knows their stuff, or somebody that's actually just for whatever reason quite a genius and quite gifted in that space. Which one am I going to want to pay the big money to? Even if like the genius didn't have the pieces of paper and the qualifications, we want that person. And so that was where, I guess, when I was younger, I was like, what is it that I actually want to do? And I overlooked my natural talents for a very long time because when I asked people, like, what is it that you think I'm good at? And they'd be like, talking. I was like, cool. I'm also really good at breathing. Like, you should see me eat. I'm so great at eating. Like, that's what I would say all the time. I was like, as if that's the thing that people are saying that I'm good at, talking. And so I just never really delved into what people meant by that. And I was in a university class, so I would have been 23. I was studying psychology and human behavior. It's always something that I've been fascinated in. Wasn't sure if that would necessarily become a career for me, but I was in a class that I loved at a university that was great, doing the thing that I always thought is the thing that you do. You go to school, you go to uni, you get a degree, and then you get a career. And hopefully you get paid well. And so there was no part of my brain that thought I was not doing the right thing for myself. And I remember sitting there in the class, and all of a sudden I had this overwhelming feeling of you're not in the right place. And I knew that didn't come from my mind because in my mind, I was exactly in the right place, studying the right things, doing the right, method.
Mm.
But it
But
was a
you felt it
feeling,
in your body. Yeah.
exactly. And it was a feeling I couldn't shake. And I went home and I remember just sitting with it and stewing in it and trying to ignore it, but it just would not go away that I was not in the right place. And I had a bit of a tantrum, my- myself being like, oh my gosh, like what is the thing that you want to do, Jess? You're 23, your friends have finished their uni degrees, most of them. Everybody's kind of figured out what they want to do. You traveled the world and flitted about. And now you're starting uni late and you still can't figure out what's the right place for you. I'm like, what is your dream career? And Xenia, the only thing it's hard to put into words. It wasn't necessarily like it was a vision, but it was a knowing. And it was that I would be a teacher of adults. And I didn't know how that looked. I'd never heard of personal development. I'd never heard of self-help. I couldn't tell you who Tony Robbins was. Never heard of him. Like, this was an industry I did not know existed.
And
So
how
I
many
didn't
years ago was this?
this was I was 23. I'm 34 now. So 10 years
Yeah.
ago.
Before personal development kind of really, really reared its head.
Exactly. And I was
Yeah.
Googling. I was like, how do you teach adults? Like, what does that look like? I didn't know what to Google because I didn't know that there was an industry for it. And this is one of the things that I've said to people. There's a unique kind of frustration when you don't know what it is that you want to do. But when you do know what it is that you want to do and you have no clue how to achieve it or no clue how to get it, that's a very different kind of torture, frustration. And so I sat in that area for um, a couple of years just trying to figure out how do I do this. And I did all different kinds of jobs. I was a youth carer. I did things with people all the time, but nothing that would say she's going to be a mindset coach. She's going to be a keynote speaker. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until um, long story short, even though I've kind of given you a bit of the long story, but it was I did in 1 year, I thought my New Year's resolutions was going to be to follow my intuition on every single decision, follow my gut instinct. That was the only goal that I had for the whole year because I was curious as to how to fine tune our intuition. Like, how do you listen to your soul? How do you listen to your higher self? And so I thought the only way to do it then is to every single decision that I make, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how much it doesn't make sense to the mind, no matter how impractical it is and nonsensical it is, if I feel to do it, I'll do it. I'm just going to experiment for a whole year. And that was the year that, of course, many crazy decisions that nobody agreed with came across my table. And because that was my commitment, followed each one of those impulses and I was catapulted. I had more um, forward momentum in that 1 year than the previous 10. just, just flew me forward. And I fell into different roles where essentially the owners of those companies were like, Jess, we want you, create a role. We're going to give you a salary, just create the role. And I created a mindset performance coach. And then it was very successful. I was poached by other big companies, and I did that for quite a while before starting my own. That's how I got here.
I love this short but not short version. That's what we want. That's what podcasts are for.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a couple things that you said that I want to touch on. The first thing is you're a mindset coach who helps people get out of the mind and into the body. What does that mean? What does that look like for someone who's like, I don't know what she just said?
Yeah, which is most people, because probably like me myself, many people are disconnected from their body, from their emotions, from their purpose, from their authenticity.
And
And
how do I know if I'm disconnected?
I think because my brain's quite practical, right? So I'm always trying to look for the clues and for the formulas. And for me, there's a couple of things of let's say misaligned. So if you're disconnected or you're misaligned or you're not doing things authentically, there's a couple of signs that's going to come up. One, you're going to feel drained. So for me, there is a real big difference between I'm physically tired because I'm working hard, but I'm inspired. You
Mm.
know those moments anywhere you could like stay up all night and you are tired, you're physically tired, but you're like, I could keep going, I could keep going. Like I've just got so much inspiration and energy and excitement and enthusiasm running through my body.
Yeah.
That's very different to I'm working hard and I'm drained, mind, body, and spirit. I am burnt out. I am drained. I'm not feeling enthusiastic. I don't feel vitality. That to me, when you're drained, not physically tired, when you're drained, mind, body, and spirit, you're out of alignment. You're
Mm.
not doing something that is actually authentic to what you should be doing, or you're not doing it in the way that is authentic to how you should be doing it. That to me is a sure sign of like disconnection. I'm
I
disconnected.
I've totally I just wanna jump in there because I totally feel that in terms of, like, you mentioning burnout. I have, um, people who know me, I would say, like, I'm like, "Burnout isn't real," and then I found someone who, like, ended up with shingles in hospital. I was like, "Okay, it is real." I just think that most people use that term when they're just feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, and they're just not lit up by the stuff that they're doing, and so it turns into, like, the effort to do that versus the effort to do something that creates purpose and passion is very different energy. So I'm so
Exactly.
glad that you said that.
Okay, good. Because that's something that we actually all can evaluate very easily. Like, where am I sitting on that spectrum? Am I tired because I'm working hard, but I'm inspired? Or am I drained? And so the second thing that I would say is when things are not flowing. Any single time I'm in alignment, and when I say alignment, what I'm referring to is what I'm doing and how I'm doing it is in alignment with who I am. So what I'm doing and how I'm doing it is in alignment with who I am. That's what I mean. So it's true to the core essence of me. And so when we're in alignment, everything flows. And that's very contrary to hustle culture and business culture and personal development culture, because what we're told is if the door's not opening, keep pushing it. Like, take off the hinges, bulldoze through it, hammer it down, like just find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. And there is a part of that that's true. We want to have a good work ethic. We want to have good resilience. We don't want to just come across something hard and then crumble and fall apart. Like we do. Well, I'm not proposing that we don't work hard. What I'm proposing is that you work hard in alignment, because then things will flow. And there's a very big difference between, you know, every single step of the way, there's like a challenge and there's an obstacle, and you've got to grit your teeth and you've got to hustle and you've got to push through and push through and push through burnout and, push through all of that nastiness. And then you just come back to another door, another obstacle, another barrier. And then you push through that and you push through that and you use all of your will and your might, and then you overcome that, and then you come to another obstacle. And when I'm coaching clients in business, because I have a lot of business owners that I coach, when they're at that point, that is when I will get them to evaluate, is that actually the right path?
Mm.
Because you should not be having that many massive obstacles. The feeling of flow where things are just happening, things are just unfolding. It's almost like, well, how did that opportunity come across my table? And then another one and another one. That feeling of flow and genius, which we've all probably had in different areas of our lives, that is a sign that you're in alignment.
It
Not
feels
having
like
is the
I was
opposite.
just gonna say, yeah, it feels like pushing or being pulled.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Mm.
And that's the difference between like pushing and is force. And I really love how you put it that way. If what you're meaning there is pushing is we're forcing, being pulled is you're being drawn to something.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And so do you think that sometimes people see obstacles when they have, like you mentioned before, emotional capacity and regulation, but if someone has low emotional capacity, sometimes they almost like create these challenges that don't exist, and I guess the difference between that versus the pushed being pulled?
Yeah. So interesting question, because it's like if we're, not very good at leading ourselves, or we're very emotionally dysregulated and we don't know really how to handle, small, let alone big challenges and obstacles. Yes. In that sense, we can be making things um, bigger than they are. Right? And that in those cases, that's where like the wisdom and maybe getting some support and some help to know sort of where you're at. Like which one is it? Is it that I'm misaligned, or is it that I need to increase my emotional capacity here? I need to increase my mental capacity. I need to it would be like going to the gym when you've never worked out before and picking up a 10-kilo weight and being like, oh, that's not, that's too heavy, putting it down and walking out of the gym. Fine. But sitting there saying, I want to build muscles and I want to build, be toned and I want to be fit, but I don't want to go inside the gym because I feel weak when I go inside of the gym. I feel embarrassed. I feel the atrophy of my muscles, or I feel other people are way better than me and I'm comparing. In those situations, obviously part of the process is you building greater resilience, greater tolerance, and greater emotional capacity.
And so how, because obviously it's going to be a spectrum and something where, we all probably still, yourself included, have things that we can work on in terms of, being triggered by things or how to regulate our emotions, how to respond, not react. Where would someone start with this if they're like, I know I need some work on this, but like, is there a way to measure emotional capacity or a way to improve your regulation in like safe environments that you use with clients?
Yeah, well, I've done a whole masterclass on emotional regulation. So people are interested in that, sort of, I guess, reach out there. That is a course that I offer to help.
We can pop a link in the show notes if that's easier as
Yeah,
well, if people are just keen to dive in.
perfect. But I'll give you the rundown, obviously, because it is the way that I look at building emotional capacity is like building strength in any area. You have to practice. And part of actually, when I did this masterclass, I added like an entire segment to it because the main question that came up from all of the participants were, what do I do if I can't feel? Which comes back to your question earlier at the start. It was like, how do you know when you're disconnected? I'm like, so many people are disconnected from their bodies and from their emotion, from that wisdom, because we all live in our minds. We're told mind over matter, mindset is everything. And we actually don't realize how much we disassociate by just going into our mind and being practical. And so often we actually have become disconnected from our emotions. And especially, as women, how often are we told that emotions and being sensitive and emotional is weak? And,
Mm.
if you come to work or you've got a lot going on at home, like leave your emotions at the door, you're at work now. And so we're always taught and conditioned to kind of disconnect from our emotions to be functional, to be successful, to drive ourselves forward. And the problem is our emotions are our internal compass, our internal guidance system. So to turn that off and disassociate from that to be successful, that is how so many people are doing things out of alignment. They don't actually have that mechanism, or they're turned off or tuned out to that mechanism that's saying, hey, this might be a good path, but it's actually not the best path. It's not the highest path. There's a better path for you. There's a better way for you, but you're turned off to that intuition and that insight because you're just hammer and tong, hustling with the path that we're told is, the successful one. And so the first part of building emotional capacity is actually tuning back into our emotions and getting rid of the judgment and the conditioning that we have been told about emotions. They are guidance. And that's why I spent that whole year of trying to figure out how to hear my internal guidance system and tune back in, because every single one of us can hear what our mind's saying all of the time. And this is what I say to women. I'm like, we've heard the term a woman's intuition. Now, men obviously also have intuition. We all have intuition. But that phrase has been around for such a long time, a woman's intuition, because we actually are naturally more emotionally sensitive. That's our strength. Men are more often physically strong. That's their strength. Women are more often emotionally strong. That's our strength. We've just been taught that it's bad, and so we haven't been taught how to develop and tap into that strength and wisdom. But one of the things I was saying was it's called a woman's intuition, but we're masterfully gifted at talking ourselves out of it. You might have the instinct or the impulse, and yet how often then does the brain go through its pros and cons list and its rationalization and its reasoning and its, and
I
we
feel
talk
personally
ourselves out
attacked.
of it. It's actually ridiculous. We laugh at ourselves because afterwards we're like, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Or I knew I should have done that. I knew I shouldn't have trusted them. Or I knew I should have followed that. Like, how many times then do you actually have that dialogue where it's like, damn it, I knew that ages ago. Or I
Mm.
knew this relationship should have ended 2 years ago. And yet here I am now catching up to that intuition.
Mm. So what if, on the contrary, our emotions are lying to us, i.e., keeping us safe when that's the thing that we do feel like we're in alignment, we're being pulled, we're not pushing, we're like, this is what I need to do, but it's just hard. And our emotions are saying, don't do it, it's scary, don't get in front of the camera, like, don't tell people how you really feel. What happens when, yeah, I guess, I don't know if you'd term it something differently, but to me, it's like if our emotions are lying to us, how do we tell the difference between like, I'm going with my emotions versus like, okay, this is enough or this is not serving me?
Yeah, great question. So there's there's a difference between intuition and emotion. And so let's draw that distinction. Right? So in our intuitive feelings can feel sometimes like an emotional you know, pull, but intuition oftentimes for myself when I have an intuitive impulse or a gut instinct, it doesn't always feel good. It actually is terrifying or it brings up my fears or it brings up so many limiting beliefs or self-doubts or like no, I'm not brave enough to do that. And so the way that I view it is we've been taught that if something feels good, then it's a good thing. If something feels bad, then it's a bad thing. Bullshit. It's absolute rubbish. So many times I have done the greatest, best thing for myself in my life has felt terrible. The emotions that I have had to experience to do that thing, to follow that intuitive knowing. It's a knowing. And to follow that, I have had to feel really bad.
Mm.
Had to feel really bad feelings. And so I've had to increase my capacity to feel bad, to feel fear, to feel shame, to feel rejection, because I know that on the other side of those feelings is the thing that I want and is the thing that I need or is the thing that I'm seeking for. And so it's not necessarily that your emotions are lying to you. They're not deceiving you. That potentially a way that we can look at it is they're telling you something. And so if you're pursuing something that you know is good for you, but you're feeling all of those emotions, those negative emotions, it's telling you something. It's telling you that you need to build greater capacity in this area. You need to strengthen yourself in this area. And so rather than sort of what a lot of people in the personal development world do is just ignore every negative emotion and try and be positive, which is just disassociating and invalidating our emotions by being positive. Right? I'm like, let's look at and let's explore the negativity. That's why I've always, in this industry, I've been known for getting to the root cause of any problem and turning performance issues around very quickly because I'm not afraid of negativity. I'm not afraid to dive into the negative thoughts, the negative feelings, and actually explore what is that emotion there to teach you and to show you. So, practical example for me, I was working with a mentor years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, where I was like, I'm ready to get to the next level in my business. I'm ready to, rather than just being like this best kept secret, this coach that has incredible and amazing results, but is not known on a public sort of platform. I was like, I'm ready now to sort of have greater impact. But greater impact, Xenia, means greater exposure. And greater exposure means greater judgment, greater misjudgment, greater hate from people that don't know me, from people that do know me, who've misunderstood me. So greater exposure brought up all of these fears that I've had. And so I might be over here saying, I want more impact and more influence. Well, the double edge of that sword is greater exposure. And I had to spend those years then getting better at feeling judgment. at
How
feeling
did you do that, like, tangibly? Did you, like, read the hate section of the comments and tried to sit with that? Or, like, what were the things that you were like, "Yep, this helped I feel better about this each time?"
So I find it funny that when we actually are truly intentional about something, the universe or, your higher self, whatever you want to term it, is going to send you the opportunities. And so for me, I actually went through some pretty horrific experiences of having some people very, very close to me saying, essentially breaking up with me, like our
Like
relation,
friendship
like a
breakups.
friendship,
Yeah.
because they didn't like what I was posting online. So literally my worst fear came true.
Mm.
And this is why I tell people the greatest gift that you can experience is your worst fear happening. Because in those moments, I remember being on this walk with this really close person in my life while they were essentially breaking up, breaking up with me and saying, Jess, I know that you're a good person. And I'm but you don't. Because if you're saying that you don't like what I've posted online, which is very well intended, you just disagree with the approach, we actually have the same intention, but we have a very different viewpoint on how to achieve that. If you're saying that you can't have a relationship with me, then no, I don't believe you actually think I'm a good person. And they're
Because
like,
you can with your true relationships, you can disagree and still love each other.
exactly. And so I was crying. I was devastated. Like, this is a
Mm.
significant relationship in my life. And in that moment, I kept saying in my head, because this was only months after I realized I had to deal with this fear. This just happened out of nowhere. And so as we were walking around, I was saying to myself, Jess, this is happening for you. I was still feeling terrible. I was still feeling heartbroken. I was still crying. I was still shocked. But I also could be reassuring myself that how is this happening for me, for my goal to have greater impact? And it didn't negate the negative emotions I was feeling. I was still feeling heartbroken. I was still feeling shocked. I was still feeling pain and deep sadness around the fact that this was happening. But I knew this was somehow happening for me. And so after that conversation, I sat there and I thought, how is this for me? And I knew in that moment, if I could handle being this misunderstood and judged by somebody that knows me and my heart better than pretty much anybody, is a significant person in my life that I never would have thought would have, misunderstood me. If I could handle it from that person, then I could handle it from random trolls on the internet, random people that I didn't know, or even friends that were less significant to me. It was, if I can get through this, then I'm released from that fear.
Mm.
And that's why I feel so strongly that the greatest thing that can happen to us is our greatest fear, because we live and maneuver through life trying to avoid our fears happening. All of the decisions that we make or don't make is because we're trying to avoid potentially experiencing what we fear. As soon as you experience it, it now doesn't have its hold on you because you survived it. You experienced it and you survived it. And sometimes you realize, you know what? Wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I've heard this thing from Layla Hormozi, and she says that fear is a mile wide but an inch deep. And so we like look at it and we're like, oh my God, it's huge. And you can't see the bottom. And then you take a step and you're like, oh, it's a little puddle. Like that was cute.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so true, but it rules our life. And so
Mm.
for me, I'm just like, if I experience those fears, they're going to dissipate. Doesn't mean that you don't feel any discomfort around those things anymore, but you actually start to recognize your strength to handle it. And so you stop avoiding, you start showing up more because you're like, you know what? If people hate me or misjudge me, I've already dealt with that. I've already felt those emotions. And it is actually just an emotion that you're gonna feel.
Yeah. And so do you therefore like take the approach of showing up more as you and acknowledging that what will be, and people can think what they think, and you feel more reassured in yourself? Or do you go, I'm going to run the fear head on and like see what breaks, and like kind of, it feels like the push versus pull analogy. I think I know what you're going to say, but like, do you ever get people to like run at the fear?
Yeah, I do. So not all the time. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on the person, and also, requires a lot of trauma informed advice, because some people, if there is has been significant trauma in a particular area, to say don't worry about it, just run at it, can re-traumatize them, or can cripple them, or can cause severe issues. So I just sort of want to speak to that. Like, this is, we're talking in general terms. We're not talking about yeah, areas where there's been significant trauma. That's going to require a lot more support and professional support and help. But in other areas where it's just an emotion that we don't want to feel, or that we feel really uncomfortable feeling, there's two approaches. One is the slower approach and the softer approach. And it is, you wait for things to happen and things to come to you, and you stay open to it, and you try and feel that emotion without escaping it. Or you go head on. And so it depends on your level of resilience, your level of capacity, because we all have a different, sort of tolerance in areas. Whereas some people that I work with, yeah, I would recommend a bit of exposure therapy. So if you're afraid of rejection, then I would say go get rejected. Like,
I
actually
love it. Yes.
put yourself in situations where your goal is to get rejected. Not your goal's not for it to succeed. Your goal's not a successful outcome. Your goal is to get rejected, because the more that you feel that, the more you build your capacity to feel it. And therefore, you're not going to not chase a dream that you have just in case you potentially feel rejection. It's like, I know what rejection feels like. I've felt it so many times. I'm actually quite skilled. I'm a skilled rejection person now, that I don't fear that. And you look at successful people that they try so many different things, because it's not that they don't fail, it's that they have a way greater capacity to fail than other people.
I have a very very apt story for this in terms of my ex-boyfriend. He was or is still a dating coach, ironically. Dated and not together, but I mean that doesn't mean anything about him. But um the way he got into this is because he was like the nerdiest guy, and he had never had a girlfriend before the age of 21, and it felt more painful for him to not experience a relationship at that point in his life than to go out and actually like the first time ever go and get rejected. And he actually did this thing where him and like four of his nerd gaming mates
Ah,
went out every Wednesday through Sunday every week for like years, and their goal was to get rejected. It was like, okay, today we need to get 10 phone numbers. Of course, you're not going to get 10 phone numbers from the first 10 girls you walk up to if you're awkward and, not confident, you don't know what to say. And then it was like, okay, tonight's goal is like, get a drink thrown on me. And like, just crazy things where he like really dived into facing that fear of really like personal rejection, as opposed to like about something that's maybe not necessarily about you. But, that then turned into a lot of people being like, how'd you do that? Like, now you're so confident and outgoing and you've got all these characteristics. And we remember when you were like the nerdy guy who didn't want to speak to anyone. And I feel like that also rings true with me, in that like I was so happy when I was single to like walk up to the guy in the bar and be like, "Hey, like can we have a chat? Can I buy you a drink?" Or like in in the gym aspect of like walking up and down the gym floor, and I felt so like all the emotions really like coming up and going like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to that person," whatever. And then I'm like, "Senia, you're here to like change people's lives. You can't do that if you're inside your own head and not talking to people." And so I'd pat people on the shoulder who had their headphones in and be like, "Hey, like I just noticed the lat pull down. Like I was just wondering why you're doing it like that, because I think there's a better way if you're trying to build muscle." And um, I think I kind of stumbled across the working through the fear of rejection without realizing it. But in hindsight, I see just how beneficial it can be, and like for my ex-boyfriend and for like me in those situations. And I think so many people, I guess they are avoiding the feeling, like
Yeah.
you've said, of that fear and therefore not going after what they really want. So how my question for you was like, how do we be okay with feeling the fear and doing it anyway? I think is kind of what this is leading towards.
Yeah. I love that example. Good on him. Right?
Yeah, yeah, it's
And look at the
wild.
work that he does now, and so I
Yeah.
feel like this is this is such a true point that you've hit on in any what I believe is that pacifying pain will rob you of any true desire that you have. Trying to pacify pain, not feel it, not experience it as deeply. Any pacifying of pain, any attempt is going to rob you of the true desire and the true purpose and passion that you have. And the only way around that is to feel the pain, is to get better at feeling that discomfort that you don't want to feel. And it- like you said with your ex, the pain of the purpose has to be greater than your fear of the pain. Your passion has to be greater than your fear of the pain. That's the key. Because if it's not, the way that we humans are wired is you just won't find the motivation to do it. You won't find the motivation to make yourself uncomfortable if you don't find a reason that is far greater than your fear of feeling uncomfortable and your fear of the pain. And so that's a part of living more authentically. Because the more authentically you live to yourself, the more you're going to find these purposes, the more you're going to find these passions, the more you're going to find the causes that are far greater than your fears. And I
And
find
so
that so
oh, you
impactful.
go.
No,
Yeah.
you.
Um, and so let's say someone's feeling like, yep, they have a purpose, but right now the fear is definitely greater than it. And I definitely feel like I've sat in this before and still in some areas at times now. But how do you, let's say, is there a way to fast track creating a greater purpose so that you can move through and either avoid being stuck or passive or whatever it is and kind of like create the friction that causes the action?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of different modalities for that. And so, like you said, sort of feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's a great catchphrase. I love it. But also, sometimes we can't. Like sometimes we're actually paralyzed and immobilized by that fear. And so, to that question, it's it's not always. Let's say that some of your listeners here are like, no, I do have the purpose. I know that purpose burns with inside of me, but the fear is so great.
Mm.
One, there could be some trauma there. And so you got to work through the trauma. Right? If that fear is so great, it's almost a phobia, it's crippling, you need to look at the trauma that is underneath that. Second to that, there it's the concept of stretching, right? So let's say that you want to do the splits. Well, if I come along and push your head down into the splits, I'm going to cause injury. I'm going to cause damage to your body. And so you have to start with like little baby steps. So let's say the fear is way too big. Well, let's start practicing and stretching, feeling it in small ways, in small doses, right? So rather than, like, let's talk about rejection, rather than going out and getting a glass of water thrown on you or, a glass of drink thrown on you, you might start off in like smaller ways, right? Well, what's a way that I could, send a prospecting email to a potential client and just get rejected? Just say, yep, sounds good, but no, thank you. Like little baby steps to sit in that feeling at a level you can handle. And as you build that tolerance, what you can handle is going to grow. And so I wouldn't always, if someone can't swim, you don't throw them in the deepest part of the ocean. You might put them around water, like a little kiddie pool that's not too deep. You might start teaching them how to swim in very shallow water where they can still stand. And so you're going to start building that tolerance and working through the fear at more manageable levels than deep ocean water.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I think so that would be if the fear feels too great, but you have a really strong purpose. What if we flip it and someone like has the purpose, but it's like a bit of a whisper. It's not like I need to do this, and they're like, well, but my current situation, they've got golden handcuffs, or they've got a really good job at the moment, or if they had to do that, then the pain um of staying isn't great enough versus the pain of change. Is there a way that you can kind of like um help light the fire in the belly or something to that effect?
I love your questions, Anya.
Actually, I've really thought this.
Really, really thoroughly love your questions because I know that people that are listening are going to want these questions asked that you're asking. It's like, okay, cool, that's great. But what about this scenario? What about this scenario? What about this scenario? Let's dig into it. And when it is a whisper, this happens, I think, more commonly than not.
Mm. And I
And
also think it's less talked about because people are like, I've got this purpose, but I'm also afraid. Whereas people who are like, well, I could stay the same or I could change, and maybe the change is unknown and it could be great, but it also could be terrible.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I find that fanning the flame of somebody's intuitive instinct is my great passion. Like that is something that I do in my coaching clinic all of the time. I can, I have people quit their jobs and, do those big, crazy, brave, bold moves because I have experienced what it's like to follow those whispers. And the truth is, not everybody is gonna follow the whispers. They're gonna wait until it's a sledgehammer.
Mm.
And I have also done that in my life, where I've had the whisper and I've been in a job that's been paying really well, been really comfortable, thought like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, it's time to leave, but, I'll do that when it's, feels really, important to leave," and right now it didn't. And it came magnificently crumbling down. Like, it's still a miracle to me how much of a shit show it turned into. Like, I was like, I have never experienced such a complete blunder before in my life. Not I didn't even create it. It just blew up around me. And that was a really painful experience in my life, but a really important lesson that I learned where it was like, Jess, you knew it was time, but you didn't, you had that feeling it was time to go, but no one told you it had to be in within the next month or it had to be in the next 2 months. And you were just cushy and cruising and staying for, comfort. And now you don't have the option to
Mm.
stay. But it was way more painful than listening to the whisper. You got the sledgehammer to the face rather than listening when the time was right. And I do believe that some of us are just going to have to experience that. Some of us, the whisper will get louder and louder and louder, and we will keep ignoring it. And especially if it's like ourselves or, loved ones that we're watching, not listening, sometimes you're just going to have to accept that they're going to get the sledgehammer at some stage. Or with ourselves, the key, like I said, the only way around that, because now you're battling with human evolution, right? Which is the fact that we won't do something that's more painful than what we're currently doing, right? So, unless you know how to battle and combat that, please let me know. But otherwise, I believe in tuning more into the whisper. Like actually now, learning at this stage of anybody's life that's listening, learn to tune into the whispers. Otherwise, they will become sledgehammers. And so you just have to make a choice. Do you want to act faster? Do you want to maneuver quicker? Do you want to be agile where it's like, oh, I'm doing this thing and now it doesn't feel right. I feel like something else. Move, maneuver. Be agile enough and quick enough to move when the small changes are presenting themselves, or get stuck doing the same things in the same ways years on, year in, year out, year in, year out. And then eventually, those changes that are required are probably going to come in more painful ways. So I would say tune into the whispers. Get better at listening to that and valuing the whisper. That's the key. Like, value your intuitive impulses more than your mind's practicality, because your mind is wildly limited. It is a terrible, terrible decision maker. I could not shout this from the rooftops more to people. Your mind is a shit decision maker. It's a brilliant implementer. It's a brilliant analyzer. Use your brain to implement, but your intuition, your higher self, your soul, whatever label you want to put to it, that should be the decision maker. Learn to honor those whispers, learn to honor your intuition, and then use your mind to make it so. Don't use your mind to talk you out of it.
And I think the thing that follows on from that for me is learning to remove the shoulds of what we should do, what we think we should do, what, our parents said we should do, what society thinks we should do, and the judgment of that. And then I guess that comes into self-trust
Oh,
and
absolutely.
coming
Yeah.
back to being authentic to who you are. Jess, we have spent a transformative 55 minutes at this point.
Oh,
I
God, it's been
feel
55 minutes.
so we should wrap it up. I'm sure we both have places to go. Um, Before we do that, the last question that I always have for our guests is, if there was one action item that someone listening to this right now could take away and help them move forward, whether it's to increase their emotional capacity, to tune into the whisper, what would you recommend that they actually practically do to support themselves with that?
Write down the intuitive impulse that you're having now, that's been coming through your mind as you've been listening to this. It's that thing that you have been holding off on, that thing that you have known that you should do or you feel that you should do. And this could be, it's either just come up or you've sat on this for years. Whatever has come to your mind as you've been listening to this, write that down. Write that little instinct, that little impulse, or that little whisper down. Second, write down what emotion you fear in relation to that. So if I was to have that conversation, if I was to do that thing, if I was to try for that relationship or leave for that relationship or leave that job or, start my business, whatever it is, could just be as simple as have a conversation with somebody. If that's what you've written down, write down what you think you will feel as a result, or what you fear feeling as a result of moving forward with that impulse and with that whisper. Because once you discover what emotion you don't want to feel, and that is the emotion that is holding you back from your dream or from your desire, now you know what your block is. Practically, save yourself thousands of dollars and you know what your block is. It's your resistance to that emotion. Third, start feeling that emotion. Start getting
What
better at
emotion.
that emotion.
I
You'll
just
have
wrote
to
down,
be a while.
yeah, I just wrote down, what emotion are you resisting? I'm literally going to get off this call and write that down for myself. I feel like I've got my own therapy session and podcast rolled into one. So thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, beautiful. People, I'm sure, are going to want to reach out or just learn more about you, jump into your world. Where is best for them to find you?
I think I'll give you some links to put in the show notes. But Instagram at that's Jess Cameron, LinkedIn if it's a more professional audience or setting that they like. I'm a little bit less on LinkedIn than I am on Instagram and Facebook, but also my website jesscameron.com, and you can find ways to work with me or reach out with me there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, coach, before you go, the reason I do this every single week and the reason we've been able to surpass 100 episodes is because of you. So thank you. We're on a mission towards never seeing another coach leave the industry because they didn't have the skills or the confidence to scale. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that before you forget. I read every single one of the comments and share as many as I can. So if you found this episode valuable, sharing it with a friend who might be able to benefit from hearing it would honestly mean so much to me. Until next time, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.